Welcome to Sweet Tea with the Classics, the podcast that takes classic literature and gives it a southern twist.
Cambello and Triamond, Fairy Queen, Book 4, Cantos 2 and 3. Once upon a time there lived a knight named Cambello, who had a sister named Canassi. This sister was very beautiful, and was the most learned lady of her day. She was skilled in the works of nature and in magic arts. She understood the virtues of herbs and the sounds of beasts and birds, and was as good as she was learned. Now many lords and knights loved Canassi. She, however, showed favor to no one. But the more difficult she was to gain, the more she was sought after. Then arose quarrels among her numerous wooers, who ofttimes fought for her in bloody combat. When Cambello saw this, he perceived that it would cause much mischief, and he set about to consider how to prevent these unseemly deeds. So one day, when this bold and mighty company of knights were assembled together, and were quarreling as usual, Cambello proposed that if they really loved his sister, they should choose 3 from among their number as champions. These 3 were to challenge and fight him for his sister's hand, and the bravest was to become her acknowledged suitor. This was a bold offer on Cambello's part, but Canassi employed her skill on his behalf. She sent him a ring, which amongst its many virtues had the strange power of staunching the bleeding of a mortal wound. The properties of the ring were well known, and when her lovers saw Cambello receive it, they began to falter and to wonder whether it was worth while to risk life against such odds for a lady of whose favor they were after all uncertain. Amongst the knights were 3 brothers, Priamond, Diamond, and Triamond. These 3 were born on the same day and loved one another dearly. Each had his own way of fighting. Priamond fought on foot, and for weapons he used spear and cutlass. Triamond on horseback with spear and shield, while Diamond, who was equally at home on horse or foot, used only a cutlass. Bolder men never lived. Now their mother, Agape, was a fairy, and had the power of knowing secret things, and as her sons grew up and showed a love of daring, she feared lest they should thereby incur disaster. She therefore determined to visit the 3 sister Fates, and to inquire of them concerning her sons. She had to leave the bright earth and go far underground to a deep, dark abyss, where was their dwelling. Agape found the sisters sitting around the fateful distaff which Clotho held, while Lachesis spanned the threads that measured out men's lives, and cruel Atropos cut them in twain. Saluting the Fates, she sat by, and as she watched them spin and cut the threads, her heart grew sad, and she trembled as she told them the cause of her coming. They at once consented to reveal to her the fate of her sons, and proceeded to spin out their threads. Agape trembled still more to see how short and thin these were. She besought them that they might be drawn out longer, but to this the sisters would not listen. Then she craved another boon, and asked that when the eldest, whose thread was shortest, died, his life might pass unto the second son, and that when the second son died, both lives might pass to the third. This boon was granted, and Agape went home to find her sons arrayed in armor ready for fight. She did not tell them their destiny, but warned them to beware of danger, and exhorted them to love each other. Now these 3 brothers were the champions chosen by Canassi's wooers to challenge Cambello. The day of combat was appointed, and as soon as it was dawn, the knights assembled in the field clad in shining armor. The lists were enclosed with rails to keep off the press of people, and at one side sat 6 judges, while at the other Canassi, beautifully dressed, was seated on a stage where she could both see and be seen by those who fought for her. The first to enter the lists was Cambello, who walked with stately step and fearless countenance. Soon after came the 3 brothers, bearing gilt shields and broad banners. They marched 3 times round the field, bowing low to Canassi. Each time they passed her stage, while trumpets sounded and clarions played. The ceremony over, Cambello and Sir Priamond advanced from the opposite sides of the lists. A trumpet blew, and they met in fierce encounter. They were a well-matched pair, and it was hard for the onlookers to say who was the better man. At length Priamond struck so mighty a blow that it pierced Cambello's shoulder, and forced him to lower his shield. Yet no blood fell from the wound, and the pain of it only made Cambello fight the more fiercely. Driving his spear at Priamond, he smote him in the thighs so that the knight reeled in agony. Then Cambello drove at him afresh, and this time fixed his spear so firmly in that, drawing it out, the head broke. Mad with pain and rage, Triamond now charged, thrusting his spear through Cambello's beaver. The weapon broke in his hand, and Cambello, dragging out the broken head, flung it back with fury. It struck Triamond in the throat, and wounded him so that he died. Thereupon his life passed into Diamond, as the fates had predicted. At once Sir Diamond rushed forth into his brother's place, and accepting Cambello's challenge, the trumpet sounded, and the fight began again. Fiercely they fought, while blood flowed freely, and their weapons flashed fire as stroke fell on stroke. But for a long time the issue was uncertain. At length Diamond heaved his axe at Cambello with such force that it must have killed him had he not seen it and swerved aside. Then Diamond, who was bowed almost to the ground with the weight of his own blow, slipped. Seizing his opportunity, Cambello with one dread stroke severed his opponent's head from his shoulders, and behold, his body remained upright for a time before it fell senseless to the earth. The spectators were much astonished, for they did not know the fate's decree, nor that the lifeless trunk had been inhabited by a double soul, which lingered a while before it passed to Triamond. Then Triamond, filled with the life and grief of two, leapt forth to avenge his brother's death, and notwithstanding the hard fight and his many wounds, Cambello met him afresh, as if he had not fought at all, for the ring not only prevented his wounds from bleeding, but restored his wearied spirits and revived his powers. But Triamond was a fearless foe, and fought so desperately that Cambello was forced to retreat, until from his very fury Triamond grew breathless. Then Cambello attacked him in turn, compelling him to retire, and so the fight went on until both were sorely wounded and Triamond's strength gave way from loss of blood. But Cambello, through the virtue of the ring, grew ever stronger, and striking Triamond on the hauberk, pierced it through, and wounded him so that he fell, to all appearance, dead. But only one of his 3 lives had gone from him, and to the utter surprise of all beholders, he suddenly arose and began again to assail Cambello. Cambello was astonished at this strange sight, and in his amazement stood still and off his guard, until Triamond's repeated thrusts compelled him to defend himself. He now fought more cautiously than he had before, as if his adversary were some uncanny thing, so that Triamond imagined the knight was getting faint-hearted, and that victory was at hand. So thinking, he upheaved his mighty blade and aimed a terrible blow at Cambello. He, seeing it come, leapt skillfully aside, and pierced Triamond under the arm, wounding him right through to the shoulder. But Cambello did not altogether escape the heavy blow, which falling on his head hurt him woefully. Both combatants fell to the ground, seemingly dead. Thereupon the onlookers thought the tournament ended, and the judges rose from their seats. The field marshals broke up the lists, and went to remove the armor from the slain warriors, and poor Canacee wailed aloud for her brother. When behold, both knights started lightly from the ground, and once more began the combat. For a long time they fought fiercely, recklessly, as if caring only to end the contest. No one could say who would win, and all were watching eagerly yet sadly for the death of one or both, when suddenly a great noise was heard, so great that the champions themselves stood still. And lo, driving at a furious speed, there appeared a chariot drawn by lions and decked with gold and precious ornaments, in which there sat a lady of wondrous beauty. She was bounteous as well as beautiful, and learned in all magic arts, for she was Cambina, the daughter of Agape and sister of Triamond, to whose aid she came. There was terrible confusion as she drove through the thick crowds, for the people pressed to see her, and her unruly steeds grew restive, and overthrew many of the mob. In one hand she held a rod of wondrous power, and in the other a cup filled with nepenthe, a drink devised by the gods to take away anger from the hearts of men, and to give peace in its stead. As she came up to the lists, she touched the rail with her wand, and at once it flew open. Then she descended from her chariot and bid all hail, first to her brother, and then to Cambello. But they were eager to return to the combat, and paid her scant attention. Seeing this, she flung herself on the bloody ground, and with tears prayed them by all that was dear to them to cease. Her entreaty availing not, she touched them lightly with her wand, whereupon their swords fell from them, and as they stood doubtful whether or not to resume them, she handed them the soothing draught, and they, being very thirsty, drank of it eagerly. Then was a wonder wrought, for the 2 fierce combatants ceased fighting, and plighted hands. as friends for evermore. When the onlookers beheld this fair sight, they shouted aloud for joy, and Canacee descended in haste from her exalted seat, and came to see what the shout portended. When she found the fighting ended and the foes at peace, she greeted Cambina, the strange lady, and offered her love and friendship. The trumpets sounded, and they all arose to depart. Cambina took Canacee in her chariot, and Triamond and Cambello returned home together, and the people rejoiced with great feasting in the land. And after a time, Triamond took Canacee, and Cambello took Cambina to be their wives, and no such friends or lovers were anywhere to be found.
Thank you for listening to Sweet Tea with the Classics. We hope you enjoyed the episode. Please like, share, and subscribe for more.